An enactive model of occupational therapy. Part 1. This two-part video series proposes an occupational therapy model based on the enactive approach. Part 1 introduces the concept of enactivism and related ideas that explain how sense-making arises through interaction with the environment. Part 2 presents a theoretical model that integrates phenomenological aspects, enactivism, and surrounding knowledge, followed by a case study interpreted through this model. The aim is not to provide a universal framework for occupational therapy, but rather to highlight one aspect of traditional practice. The model offers practitioners a tool for envisioning their perspectives and understanding their practice, though it is not intended for prediction or control of the therapy process. Introduction. The concept of enactivism has recently gained attention in cognitive science and related fields. In this section, we review the key aspects of enactivism and its applied concepts, and attempt to propose an occupational therapy model based on its principles. For those unfamiliar with occupational therapy, it is important to understand that the term occupation holds a specific meaning within this field. It does not refer to one's vocation, but to activities encompassing productivity, means work, leisure, including play, and self-care. Most occupational therapists believe that activities individuals engage in voluntarily become their occupations. Conversely, occupational therapists should constantly be aware that technical terms such as occupation are not as widely recognized in other fields. The term enactivism was introduced in The Embodied Mind, Cognitive Science and Human Experience in 1991 by biologist Francisco Varela, philosopher Evan Thompson, and cognitive psychologist Eleanor Rosch. Enaction refers to the process within enactivism, and scholars who actively advocate for enactivism are known as enactivists. The core idea of enactivism is that sense does not result from an organism passively receiving stimuli from its environment. Instead, it emerges through embodied actions and interactions. In this view, cognition is defined as a sense-making process. In contrast, conventional cognitive science posits that organisms process environmental stimuli and generate internal representations. This framework is widely applied in behavioral science, general systems theory, and other fields including the model of human occupation, which conceptualizes humans as an open system. In enactivism, cognition emerges from the interaction between the individual and their environment. The traditional perspective holds that individuals receive stimuli, internally reconstruct the outer world as representations, and then act based on those representations. Enactivism rejects the notion that cognition is dominated by representations. Instead, capturing it as an ongoing process continually renewed through engagement with the environment. Repeated embodied action establishes its own boundaries and is then recognized as an activity. Cognitive scientist Mark M. James, an enactivist, defined this process as inhabiting, the cognition through which an individual recognizes their own actions as activities might seem like a form of representation, which enactivists critique. However, enactivists do not deny the existence of representations, but rather oppose cognition dominated by them. Sedimentation through repeated embodied actions in cognition leads to the recognition of an activity, which is then named. If others recognize it, the activity becomes firmly established within oneself and forms part of one's identity. In occupational therapy, this state is considered an occupation. The process from sensory motor action to occupation is always fluid, whether cognition is sedimented within the individual or recognized socially. Thus, it cannot be captured as a static relationship, even with an authorized theoretical model. Conceptual preparation. First, we will review several key concepts related to enactivism in preparation for designing a model. These include autopoiesis theory, participatory sense-making, affordance, and symbolic interactionism. We will also discuss the concepts of activity and occupation as they are understood in occupational therapy. Francisco Varela is widely recognized as a key proponent of autopoiesis. The foundational principle of autopoiesis posits that an organism's operational activity autonomously generates and sustains the boundary of its system. In early-stage enactivism, it was assumed that the system operates with operational closure. However, later enactivists argue that enactivism and autopoiesis theory are incompatible because certain features of cognition contradict the principle of operational closure assumed by autopoiesis. These enactivists emphasize that cognitive systems are open to interaction. In contrast, enactivists more closely aligned with autopoiesis theory argue that systems can remain operationally closed while still overlapping and interacting with each other. The difference between these two perspectives may stem from differing views on how systems undergo change. This latter perspective is reflected in concepts like joint sense-making, which will be discussed later. The properties of autopoiesis may help to illustrate how human activity forms its own system boundary through its ongoing operation. The activity may sometimes appear to function autonomously, even though it is carried out with human intention. Additionally, concepts such as operational closure, structural coupling, and interpenetration could be applicable in describing how the therapist and client come to form a system through shared activities, while each maintains their own system. However, because autopoiesis typically describes systems without reference to the inside of the system, such as cognition, it may not be fully suitable for modeling the occupational therapy process. In this respect, enactivism, which addresses embodied cognition and lived experience, is more suitable for occupational therapy than autopoiesis. Philosophers Hannah Dieger and Ezekiel DePaulo propose participatory sense-making as an extension of enactivism into social cognition. In enactivism, sense emerges through interactions between individuals and their environments. Participatory sense-making builds on this by showing that sense-making also arises through the embodied actions of participants in social interactions. However, individual intention is not directly or fully reflected in the interaction itself. Through ongoing interaction and coordination, participants gradually build shared cognition. For example, imagine two people trying to carry a table together. Initially, each figures out how to move it individually. This is individual sense-making. As they adjust to each other's movements, coordination emerges. Through ongoing interaction, they create a shared understanding. This process is defined as participatory sense-making. A series of these momentum-driven sense-making interactions, integrated over time, coalesce into an experience. In occupational therapy, the initial phase involves the therapist engaging the client in an activity, leading to a gradual transition to occupation through joint sense-making. Initially, each person is engaged in individual sense-making, treating the other as part of the environment. The joint meaning-making process self-organizes the engagement, transforming an activity into an occupation. Although participatory sense-making aligns relatively closely with autopoiesis theory among enactive approaches, it presents a distinctly different perspective. Autopoiesis explains biological action from an external viewpoint, whereas participatory sense-making adopts a phenomenological perspective, emphasizing that cognition emerges through the coordinated actions of participants. The concepts of individual and joint sense-making appear to have parallels with the notions of structural coupling and interpenetration in autopoiesis. However, whereas autopoiesis characterizes these processes in terms of system operations, participatory sense-making emphasizes them through embodied interactions and mutual coordination. Rather than focusing solely on system dynamics, participatory sense-making attends to lived experience and the phenomenology of engagement. Even so, the terms structural coupling and interpenetration may still offer useful conceptual tools for theoretical modeling within this framework. A malfunction in coordination can disrupt joint sense-making, causing participants to revert to individual sense-making. This disruption is termed a breakdown in participatory sense-making. In occupational therapy, engagement between client and therapist can dissolve unintentionally for various reasons, or intentionally when goals are achieved. Although participatory sense-making emphasizes that interaction is not fully determined by each participant's intentions, the term breakdown may not be appropriate for consensual engagement closure. A related concept is affordance, introduced by psychologist James J. Gibson, referring to how an organism's movement is enabled by environmental affordance. While enactivism emphasizes interaction as an internal, individual process, affordance highlights movement's interaction with the environment. The concept of affordance is widely applied in ecological psychology and other disciplines. Arceli Dokumachi, a researcher in critical disability studies, argues that for individuals with disabilities, people around them can function as environmental components that afford movement. This suggests that therapist assistance functions as an element within the client's environment, facilitating movement. This process resembles the stage preceding joint sense-making. When the therapist introduces an activity, they enable client movement, while the activity itself becomes an intersubjective medium for sharing phenomenological perspectives. Participatory sense-making may be connected to symbolic social interactionism within sociology, which posits that human actions are guided by meanings and symbols created through social interaction. Symbols are socially constructed through interaction involving language, gestures, and artifacts. In participatory sense-making, symbols are imbued with meaning through embodiment in individual or joint cognitive processes. Although some enactivists appear to reject the role of representation such as symbols, their argument does not imply that symbols lack meaning in themselves. Rather, symbols acquire meaning through human interaction and sense-making. For example, handicrafts created in traditional occupational therapy settings function as social symbols. However, the meaning of the symbol is different for the client who has made it, the family, and others. Meaningful handcrafted gifts often emphasize social bonds and personal connections, yet scholarly focus in occupational therapy tends to prioritize the therapeutic process over the social value of the finished product. As these symbols circulate among groups, they can appear to operate autonomously, recursively influencing further interactions. This dynamic is analogous to Nicholas Luhmann's theory of autopoietic social systems, which describes society as a self-reproducing network of communication. However, Luhmann's approach excludes individual cognition and embodied sense-making, conflicting with interactionist and enactive theories centered on lived experience. Despite these theoretical tensions, sense-making processes in therapy may be closely connected to broader social interactions, involving shared symbols and recursive interpretations. In the next part, we will build on these concepts to design a model and explore its application through a case study.